It's such an honor to be able to live in this extremely beautiful valley, and it has had its challenges, and I'm trying to face those as best as I can, and that's my story. And so let's get started here. The first thing for me is that there are basic principles in agriculture, okay? And for me, there are 4 of them that I have taken out of everything that people talk about, and this is how I farm, okay? These 4 principles. And the first one is we have to have absolutely minimum soil disturbance, okay? And by that, I mean, we have to totally move away from plowing. Plowing, which has started 8,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, is basically one of the most destructive things we've ever done to the soil. It basically has reduced our carbon in our soil from maybe about 5 or 6% down to maybe 0.5%. And that fundamentally is one of the major problems we have in the Karoo, the Klein Karoo, as well as the Western Cape in general, that our carbon isn't high enough, and we need to reintroduce carbon into the soil. And how we do that basically is by having plants on the ground at all times. The other issue that I want to address first is the use of chemicals. There's no way we can just stop using chemicals, but we really need to start by reducing our chemicals. If we improve our soil quality, the use for chemicals will, the need for use of chemicals will diminish. And there are farmers, and I use ZZ2 as an example in Grabo, where they haven't used chemicals on their apples for 8 years now. And they've been very successful with that, okay? Right now, I think it would take at least 2 to 3 years of reduced chemicals, where we can rebuild up the soil organic matter and carbon in the soil and reintroduce life into the soil. Okay, the second thing is we obviously need to always have living roots in the soil. So that means even if in my pasture, even when it gets dry, I take the cows off and I reduce my animals in order to keep the pasture alive, living roots in the ground. Because what that does for me is it takes CO2 out of the air with oxygen, of course, and spins the oxygen off, which is very good for us. And the second thing is it puts that carbon in the soil, which feeds the microbes. Basically, carbon is sugar, protein, and carbohydrates. And if you mix that in your kitchen, you basically end up with cookies. So really what's happening is the plants are putting cookies in the ground, and that is feeding the bacteria. And if we feed the bacteria, they will then reestablish contact with fungi in the ground. And the fungi has this amazing ability to remove all the micronutrients and nutrients such as phosphates and potassium from the existing soil or rocks, and feed that in sufficient quantities to our plants so that we can actually eventually stop fertilizing at all. I have not fertilized now for 7 years, okay? And I'm finding that my nitrogen levels are very high, my phosphates are high, and it's working for me, okay? The third issue is, the next issue is we always need to have cover on the ground. The reason that's so important is that, especially in the Klein Karoo, if you don't have cover on the ground, the soil becomes 60 to 70 degrees Celsius, which absolutely just kills the whole microbiome in the soil. So it's very, very important that we have cover on the ground at all times. And that creates a biome which is conducive to improving our soil. The third issue is we cannot have monocultures. The problem for us with a monoculture is that, just like the bacteria in our stomach, they need a variety of foods from different kinds of plants in order to be able to feed the microbes. And so we need to eat at least 15 to 20 kinds of vegetables every week. And the same applies to our microbes in the soil. They need a significant diversity of plants growing on the soil. Now, this doesn't apply just to a pasture. This applies whether you're growing maize or wheat. It doesn't matter. There are all kinds of plants that we can grow with our other crops. And then finally, a very important practice is we need to include livestock in all farming practices. In my case, my livestock are walking biodigesters. They're taking the food that they eat, which is 14 or 15 different kinds of plants. They're digesting that and putting that bacteria back on the ground for me. I beg your pardon.
Nikki, is there a question from your side? Maybe just mute your mic. If not, I do.
Okay, no problem.
Barry, I do see Isabella has raised her hand. But you have a question, Isabella?
Go ahead, Isabella.
Oh no.
Maybe it was just.
Yeah. Maybe
Okay.
it was just...
So getting back to the inclusion of livestock practices, that it doesn't need to be cows. In my case, it's cows. And I think in order to have really a healthy farm today, you shouldn't just have cows. You should have chickens walking behind the cows. You should have pigs on the farm eating the cow manure. And and as well as you could have turkeys or ducks. There's an enormous, all of that is a new source of income for your farm. We have to build more diversity. I'm just 65, and I think if I had teenagers, I'd be doing a lot of these other things as well. And that brings me to how did I get here? I bought this farm, and if I irrigated for 10 minutes, the water all ran off. And it was so frustrating. I started looking towards chemicals. What chemicals could I plow into my soil? Because clearly, when you just plow it normally, it's sort of like dry, when you have dry meal in your kitchen and you're adding water to it, the water just flows off the top. And that's exactly what was happening on my farm. And I realized that I have low organic matter. There's no organic matter in my soil, none whatsoever. I mean, you can't really, if you make a vegetable garden, you add organic matter and you can see the soil penetrate. And then the third thing is, I realized that we're actually, in my lifetime, I'm seeing climate change. Things have changed. I mean, when I first bought my farm in 2002, I could not get my dams empty. Now I can't keep them, I can't even keep them half full. So I've really had to reduce how much I farm. And that inspired me to go look for answers. And I discovered that, everybody still farms on the old principle of you just plow. And I went out and I started looking around, and I really didn't find a lot of help from the universities or the Department of Agriculture. But what I did discover is that there was an enormous amount of research being done with regards to these matters internationally. And all these people use this incredible platform called YouTube to share their research with us. And I think that somewhere along the line, you either believe people or you don't. And I just feel that a lot of the stuff that's out there, these are not crazy people. I mean, they're not doomsday sayers. And I'm definitely not. I'm a very positive person. And I think a lot of these people have a very positive message, And the first one I came across was a guy by the name of Walter Jehne, who's from Australia. And he's an elderly scientist. And he's done an enormous amount of work on climate solutions, okay? And he's telling us that this problem of carbon in the atmosphere, okay, is an opportunity. And if we change how we farm and we regenerate about 8 million hectares of land, we can actually reduce all the carbon from the atmosphere to a reasonable level again. And there are other issues as well. And I would really suggest that you sit down with him for the hour and a half that he talks on YouTube, and just take in what he has to say. He explains climate change in a very nice way, in that basically the planet receives every day about 442 watts of energy from the sun, and we only discharging 339. That gives us a 3-watt excess that we're storing every day, and that's our global warming. And he's not talking about doomsday here. He has solutions of how animals and cover crops can deal with the problems we have today. So there are answers out there. And I think, to me, he gave me hope, but he also explained to me why it's not raining in the Southern Cape. He talks about the Hadley effect, which basically means that our climate has moved south of us about 300 kilometers. And it seems like when I'm looking at the rain forecast, it is raining south of us in the ocean. It's just not coming inland anymore. And when I look at the rest of the world, the southwestern United States is having a major drought. And unfortunately, we don't have a good cultural connection with countries like Syria, like Pakistan, and Iran and Iraq. Those people have had terrible droughts in the last 20 years. In fact, there are many areas there where people are actually not being displaced for political reasons, but they're being displaced because of the environment changing, where you just can't keep animals where it's just so hot. I mean, you can't keep animals above 50 degrees, and that is what's happened. They've denuded, they've overgrazed the country, and there needs to be a change. And if you go look at Jeff Lawton is currently in Jordania, and he is putting up some permaculture farms there, and he's really showing people that we can change the environment back to what it was before we degraded the soils. The next thing is that about hope is the agroecology in China. They've taken an area of land on the Loose Plateau that is about the size of Belgium, and they've restored it, which is, I mean, that's 8.6 million acres. That's about 3 million hectares, just roughly. And it was so degraded. And when you see what they accomplished over a 20-year period, it inspires all of us, I think, to see what changes we can make to our farms in the Karoo. And it's being done. So, I mean, I would really recommend spend the 15 minutes and take a look at what John Liu has documented, what the Chinese government did in the Loose Plateau. And I think it would really be an eye-opener and broaden a person's mind to look at what other opportunities. From that, I realized that they made all these terraces all over the place, okay? And I've done some of that on my farm. I've dug canals on very, very flat areas so that whatever rain falls, because we do get these deluges, that it ends up in a canal and it just lays there and siphons through. And that is essential. We need to keep the water on our farms. And I think this is just a wonderful video that will really inspire all of you. The next person that really inspired me to make a change was Gabe Brown. He farms in North Dakota. And this is the story about how he changed his farm into a profitable enterprise. Because ultimately, we're farming because we love nature and we love being outside and working with animals. But ultimately, I mean, we have to make money at this. And I think that it changed me from getting up in the morning and what am I battling today to this excitement of what changes am I going to make that's going to really make my farm better. And I think that if you go and watch this video from Gabe Brown, I would really recommend that will inspire you significantly. The next person is Ray Archuleta. Ray Archuleta worked for the Department of Agriculture and Department of Conservation in the United States his whole life. And he's a very inspirational person. And I think go and watch his soil health principles. How do we take dirt and make it into soil that can sustain us through this climate change period? Because we're looking at the next 30 years possibly having a further drop in rainfall by about 30%. And I think that the principles that he's talking about, basically always keeping the ground covered, feeding the microbes, okay, making your soil alive. If you can accomplish that, okay, you've really done a lot, okay? The next thing is Dr. Christine Jones. She is a scientist from Australia as well. It seems like the Australians are really doing a lot of work on this. There are obviously Americans and other people and people from India as well doing a lot of wonderful work. But these are just people that really stand out to me. And basically, she's saying to me that, we have microbes in our stomach and we need to feed them. In order for us to be healthy people with a healthy outlook on life, we need to feed our microbiome in our stomach with a variation of foods. I can't speak to South Africa, but the United States has enormous problem with obesity. Something like 47% of all Americans are under doctor care. And that fundamentally just goes to one reason, and that is their diet is not diverse enough and contains too much sugar. And the same applies to our soil, okay? We need a diversity of plants feeding a diversity of microbes so that we have a soil microbiome that is functioning, which means we're not adding chemicals to it. It needs to function on its own, and it can function on its own. And if you can avoid having to put chemicals or fertilizers on, that's money in your pocket, okay? And the other thing is, so you need to go there and do your cover crops, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But those cover crops that I've put in 28, well, I actually do twice a year. I plant about 14 different species, and that is just to feed my soil microbiome. The next thing here is, I don't know, we should all be issued this little book when we buy a farm. I mean, if you buy a car, you get an owner's manual with it, and that owner's manual tells you how to fix the car. And this is a soil owner's manual written by John Sticka, and he worked his whole life for the Department of Agriculture in North and South Dakota, and he wrote a manual. And you know what? This is an incredible manual. I would really recommend to all of you buy this book. This is the book that you need to be able to farm with. And it basically lays out the 4 principles that we discussed earlier, and it really helps you to farm more efficiently. Let me just get myself here. Okay, the next thing is I compost on my farm, and each of these bins make about 300 hectares worth of compost. And it's a very simple process. And I would really recommend that you go on YouTube and take a look at the Johnson Sioux composting method. The compost takes a year to make. It is fungally dominant. And we take that compost and we mix it with a seed with milk, and we make a consistency of a batter that I then mix with the seeds, and I plant that directly into the soil, thereby putting a lot of microbes around each little seed, creating an environment where that seed gets a message from those bacteria. This is a great place to grow, that I need to grow now, okay? And it makes a huge, and if you think you can't do this on a large scale, Diane and Sue Haggerty in Western Australia, they make enough of these that they plant 32,000 hectares of oats every year. So if you want to go look at their video, it's very simple how they do it, but they basically make the compost and then they make a tea out of it, and they put it on their seed and they plant it, and they are very, very successful. The reason they've become so large is that they have managed through this process to grow a lot of oats without irrigation, and they've actually ended up just buying out their farmers. The next thing is, what are my solutions? And really, our solutions are bacteria in the soil. We need to get the bacteria in the soil to function at an optimum and create an optimum environment for our pastures or our cash crops. It doesn't matter. And the question is, how do we do that? Okay, what are my solutions to that? My first one is I do absolutely no-till. I no-till my cover crops right into my pastures twice a year, and I have a winter mixture and I have a summer mixture, which I will share with you. And I literally just plant it right into the pasture after it's been grazed at a certain point. There are obviously considerations for when you plant. I have to plant my top pastures in the 31st of January, or I don't have grazing in December. And this year was really a crazy year. I was still grazing winter pastures the first 2 weeks of January. We really just did not have much of a summer this year. So I plant 14 species twice per year, and this is what it looks like when I plant. I don't graze it down all the way. This was grazed maybe 3 days before I planted here. So stuff is always coming back. Okay, and we put the pasture in and water it, and then it grows. It's actually very, very simple, and it's very inexpensive actually, because we're not plowing. Okay, then we come to grazing. So how I graze is we put up an electric fence, okay, in the pasture, and we graze 1/3, and we stomp 1/3, and we leave 1/3. The reason we do it like this is for the fun. That 1/3 gives me enough food for, in this case, it's 68 or 70 square meters per day per cow that my animals get, and I have them on there for no more than 12 hours. So I move every 12 hours. It is recommended that you actually move more often than that, but I find for now that this is working well for me. So I only graze 1/3, okay? And then there's this 1/3 that's stomped, and that 1/3 that is stomped becomes food for my microbes. And that's sort of where my microbes take that and they eat that. And when they're eaten by other microbes, that becomes the organic matter in my soil. And then I leave 1/3. And the reason I leave 1/3 is so that that pasture can regenerate much faster, because there's leaf area that immediately starts to photosynthesize. If you, in fact, graze it all the way down to the ground, the problem you have is that you can only get back on the pasture in 60 days. By leaving 1/3, I can get back on 45 days. At 45-day cycle, that gives me 9 grazings a year. But if I graze down to the ground, it only gives me 6 grazings per year, if that makes any sense. And that is really the crux of the matter, is how you're managing your pastures, okay? Okay, my core management principles on my farm. I move my cows myself, and I recommend you do too. It's the best part of my day is when I move my cows. I get to see that everybody's healthy. I just get to see that what's going on. It gives me a much better feel for what's going on. The next thing is, don't overgraze. Don't leave your animals there too long. If you can predict how much pasture you have, which you'll see just now, you can predict how much pasture you have, and you need to adjust your animal numbers based on how much grazing you have. And that's one of the things that FruitLook does for you. They give you an idea of what your grazing looks like at the moment and what it's going to look like in the future. The second thing is, of course, don't overgraze. Do not graze down to the ground. That's very, very important. And then the third thing is how to manage your water. It's very, very important that you manage your water properly. Don't overwater, don't underwater. You really need to pay attention to what FruitLook is telling you on what the evaporation was for that week and how much you need to put down. That is the real strength. Excuse me. And the next thing I'm going to talk about here is a little bit about FruitLook, and I'm just going to change my screen here. I'm going to log into FruitLook so that I can just show you some of the things that we use. So I don't just have my pastures on FruitLook. I have my whole farm on FruitLook so that I can see what is happening in my felt. So I've just got my felt on there in the red. But I'm going to go to a field that's right here in front of my house, okay? And so this on the left-hand side, on the biomass production, is telling me that last week, this field here in front of my house, made 235 kilograms of biomass. So I can see what my increase is. The other thing is I can see here that since last August 1st, okay, that I've generated 43,513 kilograms of biomass on that field, okay? To me, that is a fantastic production. Now, I want to stop there for a second and just talk about production. So I have 26 hectares that I'm actually farming, okay? That is all the water that I have. I potentially have about 70 hectares that I could irrigate, but it's just not physically possible, and I can't have my cows on the field, on the felt, because we had a massive fire 4 years ago, and if I look at my rainfall numbers, it's just not been there. So the question is, what does a healthy pasture look like? And I tell you that every year, to me, that number gets better. I mean, one year I'm going, wow, this pasture looks amazing. And then I look at the following year and I go, wow, that's where I was last year, but look what it looks like this year. So at the moment, I can tell you that we're producing 1,000 kilograms of beef per hectare. So that means that I produce a little bit more, actually a little bit more than that. I produce about 5 calves, weaners, at 240 to 250 kilograms per hectare. And the question is, how much can I really produce? And I don't really know what that number is, but I have read about a man in Idaho who was producing 6,600 kilograms per hectare. Now, for me, that number looks better than just about any cash crop out there. I mean, so at the moment, we've taken a bit of a knock this last month in beef prices. We came down 10 Rand per kilogram, which, you know, that's such an incredible number. That's 2,500 Rand per calf, or 25,000 if I market 10 calves. And that's because of the foot and mouth disease that's happening in Potchefstroom. And so the feedlots are not buying calves. I don't have enough land to be able to finish my calves out to 450 kilograms, and which I would really like to do, but I could only do that if we actually have more land available for grazing. Sorry, I'm just going to do this here for a second. I want to just show you what this looks like. So here you can see basically, if you look at last August, the biomass production was 750, and then we grazed. So all these low spots that you see on my graph are where we actually grazed, just after we grazed, okay? And then you can see in April, it starts slowing down because we are looking at winter, and obviously things are just slowing down. And then as soon as August comes back up, we will spike back up again. So this is a very important graph. This shows me where I am at all times during the year. Okay. So when I look at this field, it's telling me exactly what this field looks like. So in the purple area here, you can see that I'm even at now, I'm getting very good production. Down here on the light blue, it's not that good. And I can tell you exactly why that is because that's where my field is actually not that good, okay? It still needs a lot of improvement down here, but on the whole, it's getting much, much better, okay? And I'm just gonna go back to my presentation here. Okay, and then, so I just want to show you what I'm planting in terms of my mixture, if that's to be of any help to you. I want to go to Excel here. Okay. Taking a second just to come up. Okay, so this is my mixture of what I plant, okay? And these seeds are available around all over the place, and I don't just normally plant this. I might, if I find something somewhere else, some little odd things, I'll add that as well. So I basically try and plant certain amount of 3 or 4 at least of legumes. I don't, the lucerne and stuff and red clover and white clover is already in my pasture. It's been there for a number of years and it reseeds itself, so I don't actually need to plant that. My pasture base used to be quick, which is a soil armor, and it is one of the 9 plants that does not actually need bacteria to grow. So it's really a fantastic grass. But what happens is as you start adding bacteria into the mix, you find that the quick becomes less, or cynodactylon becomes less and less, and it's being supplanted by kikuyu, which I actually never planted. It's just showing up. And then obviously I add a bit of sun hemp there, which gives me some height and a good amount of nitrogen. I add cowpeas and mung beans for my summer, and then I add some grasses, some taller grasses. And I'm finding by planting these taller grasses that it's really bringing back my bird life to the farm, which is just, I mean, it's just fantastic when you walk out and you find all this bird life out there. And then I obviously add some taller grasses, sorghum, pearl millet, or babala, and I add a grazing corn, which I plant through what used to be my fertilizer box on my planter. I've just closed off all the fertilizer units and just left 2 open, and I plant the grazing corn maize through there. And then I plant buckwheat. I really like planting buckwheat. It matures very, very quickly and produces flowers very quickly. And that really helps the bees very early on in the season. It's very important we get this bees settled in there. And this last year I planted okra. It did reasonably well. The cows really like it. I personally don't really care for it. It's like snot when you eat it. And then I added pumpkins. And so that's my summer mix. And you can get that from any of our local suppliers here. And they'll be most helpful to help you with that. And the next one I'm going to look at is, we're just going to look here up. Look at the winter seed mix. Okay, in my winter seed mix, I like having hairy veg. It grows nice and tall, and it feeds the bees. It flowers very quickly, and I like winter peas. They're just coming into bloom right now. And then I did actually not plant winter lentils this year. I couldn't get hold of any, and I planted faba beans, which also did not do that well, actually, for strangely this year. And then, of course, titricale or kuroch, barley, and black oats make up, but very small amounts, really, not large amounts. And then I planted cereal rye, which is roja. And then I planted an annual ryegrass and an annual ryegrass. One is a tetraploid and one is a diplodoid. And that gives me about 17% 17% protein in it, which is just fantastic in the winter. It grows very fast, and we graze it on the 5-leaf stage because it just grows too fast compared to the other plants. So we probably don't get as much benefit out of it as we should, but it's giving us volume. And then kale is one of my favorite things to plant. Lovely just to, when you need a salad in the house, you walk out, you just pick your own boerkool there. And then rapeseed, purple top, which is a turnip. And then we plant radishes. Those open up the ground for us. And unfortunately, the baboons are also very fond of those. And then the final thing is we plant white mustard. Okay, and the white mustard is just a broadleaf because we need to have that mixture of plants feeding our our microbes. And that's the story about my farm. And I would invite any of you who'd like to ever drive through Meijer, stop by. And this is what it looks like at the moment. We've just put the cows on this pasture this last week. And that's my story. If there's any questions, I'd gladly answer anything you'd like to know.
Thank you so much, Barry. That was very, very interesting and informative, especially for me. It's just so cool to see all the amazing stuff you're doing, and your passion is just so energizing. But I'm going to now open the floor to all our attendees. Please, if you have any questions, I do see there's one hand raised here. Peter Greef, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, please. What is your question? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning,
thank
Peter.
you. Most interesting, and also congratulations on your successes up to now. Please, have you measured the carbon in your 0 to 10 or 10 to 30 centimeter layer? And what's the, when you're irrigating, what's the infiltration rate like under your summer mix and winter mix respectively? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I've never measured my carbon, okay, and I probably should. But I can see that the soil has changed color totally from being red to being black, which I guess that is an indication. As far as irrigation goes, this is what I irrigate, okay, which I based on my FruitLook numbers. I basically take the irrigation number from FruitLook, and that's what I replace every week. But I'm actually a week behind because I only get the numbers after the fact. That is not an issue because that just sinks right into the ground. So the real test has been when I've had rainfall incidents of maybe 40 millimeters in a morning, and none of that water has run off these fields. So I would have to say when we did an infiltration test last year, it seems like we can take about 30 millimeters in 12 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? You're welcome to also type it in the chat box. But I do see Eric has a question. You've raised your hand. Go ahead, Eric.
Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Barry. Very informative. Thank you very much, Barry. The Europeans are very, very concerned about livestock methane. One of your principles is always have livestock. Any comments to that? Because I also think that any animal production arm is essential in sustainable agriculture, but the Europeans are very, very sensitive about this livestock methane thing. Any comments?
Yes, I think they should be concerned about methane. We should all be concerned about methane. We've had, historically in the past, we've had much higher numbers of methane. But I want to, and this leaves a wonderful opening to me. So regenerative agriculture is basically mimicking nature, okay? If we go back 120, 130 years, we had these large groups of herbivores moving through the Karoo, okay? And they were being pushed by predators, and they ate everything in front of them. And then they just moved on and probably didn't come back for 5 or 6 years. That allowed, okay, all that material to grow back unperturbed for 5 years or so. And we're doing it artificially on my farm on a much smaller cycle, because we're obviously adding water where the Karoo doesn't have the ability to add water. Now, if you watch the video by Walter Jehne, you're going to see that he explains it as follows, that when cows graze on the grass, okay, that certain free radicals come off the grass, okay, and they consume the methane gas the moment it's produced from the crop. So actually, when you have a situation where you're regeneratively grazing, you have a negative, okay, methane. There's no methane being released. Where the problem comes in is when you have animals in a feedlot where there's no grass to release free radicals and consume that, because I think we both have to acknowledge that when animals are in a feedlot, it's a very artificial situation, and the animals are just standing there eating, grazing, and defecating and releasing methane gas. So I think, yes, the Europeans are right about that, but we as farmers have the ability to mitigate that situation by farming regeneratively. And that's, I think, why the Dutch government is doing so much to try to basically, they're trying to put a lot of farmers out of business, because a lot of their farming is done in feedlot kind of situations. And that is the problem. And we in Africa have the ability to farm on huge tracts of land regeneratively. It's just a change that we have to make. So I really recommend that you watch Walter Jehne's video. He addresses that very nicely. And yes, it's a very, very important fact. And I want to add something else here, is that I really like these animals. I mean, I love them. I mean, they are my babies. And I have 2 days on my farm that are really hard for me. The one is that when I have to burn off horns, and the second one is when I have to ship off calves. I mean, when you walk through these animals twice a day, you get to learn their personalities and all kinds of things. So I have no problem with people being vegans, but I really want people to eat meat, but I want them to eat it respectfully, because something gave its life for me to be able to eat it. It is the natural course of life, whether it is on a microbial level, something eats something else, and we're just part of nature. We are not separate of nature. And if we think we are separate, that's what's caused this major climate problem that we have in the world. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, Eric and Peter and Barry, and beautifully said, Barry. 100% agree. We're so much part of it, hey? Okay, I see there's another question. Lani, go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Hello,
Morning, Lani.
Hey, Barry, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. Just a quick question on your timings of your grazing. So you said
Yes.
you don't keep them in more than 12 hours, and you said so you've got like graze a third, leave a third, and stomp a third. So is it just that you have got, okay, you put in 12 hours and then you move it, or do you look at grass height, or did you measure your moving interval because you looked at the grass height?
Okay, so first of all, this is where this incredible program comes in. FruitLook it's telling us basically how much biomass is there, because and they are going to make a change so that we can zero out the number every time we graze. But every time when I graze, I just make a note on my notepad. That's how much biomass there was, or I look on the graph, and then I can see how much biomass there is. There's something else here that I haven't discussed, and it's because I don't actually know how to works. But one of the things I can see from Blue North or FruitLook is I can see the percentage of nitrogen. In fact, I'm just going to quickly go there and just show you this. Okay, this is actually quite amazing. Okay, excuse me, I'm just deficit percent nitrogen. Okay, so here's my nitrogen. Okay, so one of the things I've discovered is that once the nitrogen hits, okay, about 24, okay, that the pasture is ready to be grazed as well. Don't ask me why, because I can't scientifically explain that. But it seems like once you'll see all these drops are where we've grazed. And then as we're waiting for it to grow back up, the nitrogen is, once the nitrogen hits about 24, 25 kilograms per hectare, that tells me your pasture is now getting ready to be grazed. And it's also when I walk the pastures, I can see when a pasture is ready to be grazed. The reason I basically have worked out, okay, that my animals need to get about 70 square meters per day to eat per animal. And so I know that in 12 hours, I can see there, because I'm there, that they've now grazed a third. They need to move tonight. They need to go to the next thing. I arbitrarily do that. And sometimes we actually graze maybe a little bit less, but I never graze more, okay? And it's just something that you walk out. Yes, and I know that dairy farmers, when we go to the proefplaas, they show us those measuring things and things like that. But I mean, to me, that's just too much PT. I just like being out there with the dogs and just hang out with the cows, and I can see what's going on. I mean, in Afrikaans, we say the best thing for your farm is voetspore op jou plaas. Does that answer
Awesome.
it?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Very, very, very interesting.
Thanks, Delani. Great. Are there any more questions? Peter, as you have raised your hand. Yes, go for it.
I was going to ask about the grazing, if it's high density grazing, and it's ultra high density, and it appears to be so. And then on the nitrogen, thank you for those figures. Can we look at your present nitrogen in the total plant?
Oh,
Because
yes,
you've
yes.
just got
Of course. Isn't it cool that we can share this?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's
more or
one.
less the same sort of graph, yeah.
Isn't it amazing? So we're looking in front of the house, we're looking at 49 kilograms per.
Yeah, very good.
I mean, isn't that an incredible number? I mean, to think, I mean, so all you have to do is sit down and calculate what that would have cost me if I purchased it. And that is the whole, I want to talk to something else here as well. You see, if you plant a monoculture, let's say you plant lucerne, okay? First of all, you're not going to get the biomass just off lucerne that I am off my pasture, okay? The real thing is that in order for lucerne or a legume to make nitrogen by itself growing out there, if you have medics growing out there, it's taking so much carbon from the soil as a source of energy to make nitrogen that your soil compacts. And that's another reason to have a variety of plants, so that everybody's putting carbon into the soil so that your legumes can make nitrogen for you. Does that make sense?
Could you indicate on there when you planted your winter crop or your winter cover crop, which has got your legumes?
In this field, I planted it here in April.
Okay, so you got a beautiful gain there through to end of May.
Yes, I did. And then it's sort of dipping, and it's just been, it's been a little bit chilly. And suddenly this week it's summer. I don't know, it's summer. I don't know how it got to be. This weekend it was 25 degrees out. And this
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
This is what's making farming a little bit more complicated, isn't it? Is our weather.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Eric, yes, go for it.
Hi, Eric.
Barry, me again. Just a quick thought. You said that the lucerne, the monoculture, taking up too much carbon would densify your soils, compact your soil.
Yes.
You as a personal, would you go and overseed an old lucerne field?
Absolutely. I need, forgive me here. I actually forgot to mention that. All my fields have lucerne in them, okay? I don't have a field that doesn't have lucerne in it. I mean, we all acknowledge that lucerne is the queen of grazing, isn't it? Yes. And so all my fields have I think I planted like 3 kilograms per hectare. So there's lucerne that comes up in all my fields. And okay. So what you're actually, to get back, let me just explain. So if I was a wheat farmer, I would plant right into my medics.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, but Barry, then a next question. If your cows can't take off that third of grazing, how would you adjust to that? Would you cut to get to that optimal, or would you just leave it?
Okay, I own a tractor, okay? My tractor is now 12 years old, and it's got, I think, about 1,800 hours on it. So I know that I work about 130 hours a year, okay? I cannot afford to start that tractor. I mean, when it costs me 3,500 Rand to fuel it, okay, it's just a number that's so large that you cannot afford to bale or cut hay on your farm. Animals have to be eating it standing. I rather just move the animals and it just grows back quicker. So my cycle becomes quicker. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I totally support your point of view.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Any more questions? You're welcome to type it in the Q&A box as well.
You have something in there?
I had a question relating to FruitLook, just about how the data gets applied automatically, or if a user has to enter any data. So I just explained to you, you just draw in your block and then you get your data every week. So it's as easy as that. We process about 13 million hectares in the Western Cape, which is most of the Western Cape, each week. And then we provide you with the previous week's data for all your parameters. I see there is a question. Oh, thank you, Peter. Peter just said, thank you for excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Doesn't look like it. Yes, Barry.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. And I really, this program, FruitLook, is paid for by us, the taxpayers. And we really should all be using it. We have about 6,600, I think, commercial farmers. And I think at last, Bianca told me we have about 330 users. We really need to encourage our neighbors to look at this program. It's for free. And it is just so amazingly powerful and helpful. And I just want to say something away from what I do is, I mean, I have shown one of my neighbors how she can even look at it and possibly predict disease by looking at those, at the actual maps. Those pixels right now are 10 by 10, is that right?
Yes, Barry, 10 by 10 meters resolution.
10 by 10 pixels. I mean, there's so much information that you can garner out of that, and it's for free. We need all to be using this program. And I mean, yes, I've applied it to pastures, but I mean, I can just see how you could apply it to growing onions and how you can apply it to growing vegetables. There's just an enormous potential here, and we really need to be making use of it because, I mean, we just can't afford this program if we had to pay for it ourselves, I think. So, and just thank you very much. And I just hope you all do very well and we sort out all our marketing problems for fruit and everything we have to this year. It's just really been a challenging year, I think. And if anybody would like to visit, please feel free to come and see me anytime. I love having people on the farm. And That's it. Thank you, Dianca, for all your trouble. Okay.
Thank you very much to you, Barry. This was a very, very informative, wonderful session. And thank you for everyone who joined. I will be uploading this session to YouTube, so if anyone wants to revisit anything, you're more than welcome to. We'll share that via our FruitLook newsletter. And like Barry mentioned, FruitLook is free to use for anyone in the Western Cape. If you're a producer, if you're a researcher, a consultant, the Western Cape Department of Agriculture is funding this program. And any support needed, me and my team, we are available via any form of communication. You can WhatsApp us, call us, and we'll offer you some support. We're there to help you. We've got an amazing YouTube page and a manual, so there's a lot of help. So please do check it out. And if you have any questions for Barry or myself, please just send us an email after the session. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely day further. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.